So I'd just like to welcome everybody that's coming in. It seems really quiet here. So we'll give people about another 4 or 5 minutes to join, and then we're ready to start our session. And this is the perennial grain session, if you're wondering if you know that you are in the right place. Well, my time says 6:10 Central Time. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with this session. And as people come in, we'll just, Matt, can you admit them as well as I can?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie O'Neill. I work for SDSU Extension in the area of community vitality. We farm and ranch, my husband and I, east of Martin, South Dakota. So I'm really interested to hear Tessa's talk tonight. Tessa Peters is the Director of Crop Stewardship for the Land Institute. And in her role, she aspires to provide guidance as Konza perennial grain and other crops leave the realm of pure research and begin to end up on the plates of consumers across the globe. Her work with researchers, growers, processors, and food makers helps steward the transition from annual to perennial agriculture. Tessa has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in plant breeding and plant genetics and works remotely from Laramie, Wyoming. She believes that the long arc of annual agriculture is ready for cultural, environmental, and economic shifts that ensure a just perennial future for humans. Welcome, Tessa. I'm excited to hear your presentation.
Thanks, everyone. I want to say thanks to South Dakota State and to SDSPA for inviting me to talk about my work. And I want, particularly in this like crazy time of elections and pandemics, to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to me talk about my work at the Land Institute and about our work more broadly. So I'm really grateful that I know that your time is valuable. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I am going to start my screen share here, and I do have slides. I'm happy to answer questions. Please feel free. I don't know whether you're allowed to interrupt or not. But if you find yourself needing to, please do so. I'm really excited to talk about a little bit about the Land Institute in general and about Konza grain in particular, which is one of the perennial grains that we work on at the Land Institute. So I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about, if I can advance, there we go, what the Land Institute is and what we do. We're a 501c3 nonprofit research organization. We are the main research campus is located in central Kansas on former Kaw, Pawnee, and Osage lands. We own some land in central Kansas and also work with growers in the area and lease some land for our plant breeding activities and things. So our mission is to develop a perennial, diverse agriculture that saves soil from being lost or poisoned and promote a community life that is prosperous and enduring. So that's a pretty big mission. But the founder of the Land Institute, Wes Jackson, is famous for saying that if your life's work can be accomplished in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. So we're excited about this challenge. A perennial is a plant that grows year after year without having to replant the seed. And, you know, currently in agriculture, the main perennials are things like alfalfa or other forage grasses, or not other forage grasses, but forage grasses, tree crops, and berries. But almost all of current grain agriculture is annuals. So wheat, barley, rye, oats. There are some perennial ryes and some perennial barleys, but there are very few of them in terms of acres on the landscape, and the Land Institute aims to change that. We believe that this needs to change because we know that erosion is one of the biggest problems in row crop agriculture. The graph on the left-hand side here shows the amount of soil that's lost in Iowa due to water erosion. And the picture here on the right-hand side is actually one of our Konza growers and researchers in Kansas. On the right-hand side of the photo here is a Konza field, actually, in early spring, so it's still primarily in dormancy. And then on the left is a tilled field that you can see has had quite a lot of erosion. We believe that the overriding principle of controlling this erosion is to increase the duration of vegetation and intensity of vegetation that is covering the land at all times. This photograph here is actually a picture of the Konza Prairie, which is in northeastern Kansas, just northeast of Salina, where the Land Institute is located. And you can see there's a huge diversity of plant life and no bare soil. So what we would like to see is an agriculture that looks more similar to this than it does to the current row crop agriculture. The reason that perennials are so beneficial, of course, is because we don't have to till. Well, reduce tillage. You may have to do some tilling between or something for weed control, but the goal is to reduce tillage, to increase or to reduce the amount of soil that's lost, to increase the carbon storage. So on the right, you can see this huge root. This is a hybrid perennial wheat compared with an annual wheat. And that huge amount of biomass entering into the soil profile is a way for carbon to be stored. It's also a huge factor in increasing soil organic matter. It also helps increase water infiltration, so less runoff in terms of just water runoff, which also means less pollution runoff in terms of like nitrogen fertilizer or herbicides or pesticides. So we really believe that by increasing these kinds of perennials, we can reduce soil loss, increase weed competition, increase biodiversity on the landscape. And we do this through 5 different program areas. So we have a perennial grain crop development area, which is primarily focused on plant breeding of perennial grains. We have an ecological intensification program, which is really focused on increasing the number and diversity of plants on the landscape. And they do a lot of soil science as well. So you can see here in the top right hand, this is a Konza field that's intercropped with alfalfa. So it's a Konza alfalfa intercrop. And our ecological intensification folks do a lot of work on looking at those kinds of bicultures and polycultures. We have an Ecosphere Studies program that's really focused on changing the cultural, the culture that is really going to be required for an adoption of perennial agriculture. And we have crop stewardship, which I'm the director of, and I'll be talking a lot more about kind of my work as we go on. And then finally, we have an international arm that fosters international collaborations. So I'll go into each of these a little bit more. This international arm is really focused on invigorating and supporting perennial grain research worldwide. So in the bottom photograph, you see a bunch of researchers from all over the world, from Africa, Asia, South America, Central America, the US and Canada, and also Europe. So we have collaborators all over the world, and we are building methods and networks to support their research. In crop stewardship, our goal is really to balance the livelihoods of rural people, to make sure that we have a social foundation that can provide a really robust culture for the adoption of perennial grain crops, at the same time as looking at ecological limits and making sure that we're not out here using more resources and affecting climate change and things like that in ways that we don't want to. The Ecosphere Studies program is really focused on the just perennial transformation. So they do a lot of work in ethnobotany, in civic science, getting people all over to be involved in our research. So we have programs where, in fact, I'm a member of one of the programs where we're trying to just determine what the range of some of our crops are. So we have individuals who all over the nation who plant them and report back. So that's our civic science program. And then they do a lot of spearheading of the global initiatives as well. As I talked about ecological intensification, I talked about this perennial polyculture development, but we also do a lot of pest and resistance, both breeding, but also just understanding the pest cycles. So a lot of understanding of like fusarium in Konza, disease cycles and resistance. This bottom picture is a picture of our entomologists out at night looking for eucosma moths, which are a big predator of silphium, which was one of our crops. And then our perennial grain crop development, which approaches this from two aspects. So we have different programs. One of them is approaching development of perennial grain crops from domestication. So they take a wild plant that's already a perennial and make selections to adapt it for human use. This is our Konza program, is a domestication program, as well as silphium and legumes. In the top left, you can see one of our legume crops is sainfoin, which you may be familiar with. So we're looking at domesticating sainfoin as a human food crop. And then we have a perennialization program where we're looking at making wide crosses between wheat and perennial wheat, rice, and sorghum, and a perennial relative of those crops. So trying to keep everything we like about the grain crop at the same time as crossing in that perennial nature. And then from this point, I'm really going to kind of focus in on Konza and talk about the work that's happening on the Konza front, both in terms of domestication, but primarily focusing on the crop stewardship aspects, which is getting these crops onto the landscape and into production systems. I always like to start with this slide that reminds us that wheat, corn, and other major crops were being domesticated 10,000 years ago. And, you know, if you look at the timeline, it was 60,000 years ago that we really were even at the Green Revolution. And Konza, we've been working on for about 15 or 20 years. So when I'm talking about all of this, from the supply chain development to the marketing strategies to the trademark and all of these things, I want to remember that we are really in the infancy and the experimental phase of developing a new grain crop for US agriculture and worldwide agriculture, but I'll focus primarily in terms of supply chain and things like that on the US market. I think it's going to advance, maybe. Okay, there we go. So Konza is the grain produced from Thinopyrum intermedium, which is intermediate wheatgrass. This is a common forage grass in the US. It was introduced more than 100 years ago and is grown all over the place for uses primarily for forage. What the Land Institute has done is taken that forage grass and then made selections in different populations for increased seed size, for reduced seed loss at harvest, so shattering, for more uniform ripening, and for increased naked seed production. So in general, Konza comes in a hull and has to be dehulled, but the breeders are really selecting for a decrease in that hull. So the name Konza is a trademark that's owned by the Land Institute. So it is a trade name that's just used on products that have the Konza name. And this is a portmanteau of two words, the first being kernel, which is the seed of the cereal grass, and the second being Konza, which is a native tallgrass prairie that you saw a picture of earlier. It's also an alternative name of the Ka people and the Ka Nation. Initially, it is also the name of the Kansas research station where a lot of the initial research on Konza has been done, and that was what was behind the naming when it was first named. So why do we have a trademark on this grain? Why doesn't it just exist in the marketplace widely and anyone can use it and do whatever they want with it? The reason that we do that is that we've been really working on ensuring that Konza is valued for its ecosystem services. So a lot of those things that I talked about earlier, for its ability to sequester and cycle carbon, improve water quality, improve soil health, all of these things we think should be a part of what the grain is known for and what it's valued for. We also think that it should be a viable investment for growers. So we're in the process right now. We received funding to solicit an organization or a firm or an individual to formalize a Konza Stewards Association that will be a multi-stakeholder organization that will help in terms of the governance of this trademark. So ensuring that valuation of both the ecosystem services as well as some of the social benefits that we think should happen. So ensuring that growers get a fair price and that rural livelihoods are valued as part of the grain is a big part of our interest. And there are some growers cooperative. There is a growers cooperative that is starting to formalize in Minnesota. So we're hoping that those folks will also have a voice in terms of helping us understand how to best steward this grain into the marketplace while valuing rural livelihoods. Finally, the trademark is really important. Not finally, I have one more slide about this actually, is really important that eventually that Konza becomes something that anyone can afford to eat. We do not want it to remain in the realm of a niche product forever. That is certainly where it is now. But the goal is that this will be widely available. And we understand that in order for that to be the case, we need to have an improved yield. And that's in order to improve the yields on this crop, we know that we will have to do two things. One is approach it from a breeding aspect, so increasing seed size, increasing uniformity, increasing harvestability, all of those things, but also improved management. And that is really where we are in terms of, that's another place where we're really experimenting. Growers that are growing Konza are absolutely on the front lines of experimenting with what's the best row spacing, what's the best seeding depth. Should they mow it in the fall? Should they mow it in the spring? Does it need to do you have to till between the rows in the third year? These kinds of things are really not known because we don't have that 10,000 year arc of building best practices for management that we have with some of these other annual grain crops. So we're really enlisting growers in this experimentation phase to figure out what those practices are so that yield increases. And then finally, part of what we do through the trademark is to ensure this network and community support and development. We widely disseminate as much information as possible. Of course, we can't force any businesses to give up, their food recipe or whatever, but we certainly have networked with folks who are in this pre-competitive phase, trying to solve problems along the supply chain, and are sharing proprietary, what could be considered proprietary information with one another in order to bring this grain to the market, because they really see that it can be a game changer for soil health and for the world, not just for their particular business. We manage, oh, geez, sorry about that. We manage the trademark by licensing, by having licensing agreements with folks at 4 different places along the supply chain. So seed growers and grain growers both have licenses which allow them to sell licensed grain. Handlers who are kind of maybe processing, doing distribution on the wholesale level, they also enter into licensing agreements. And then finally, the buyers, who are kind of in 2 different realms. There are like CPG manufacturers and food companies, and then also like restaurants or breweries who have products available. To become a grower, I am hoping there are kind of growers on the call. You can apply online, and then and mostly me, I look at the applications and ensure that the crop is a good fit for the operation. So a lot of times there are folks who maybe only have a couple of acres, and with this grain, which is so much smaller than wheat, 1 or 2 acres, you're generally not going to get much of a harvest off of it. And so I just really try to look at whether or not this grain is a good fit for the operation. And then if I approve the application, I send a license that gets signed and uploaded, and then I provide the seed sources. So in order to purchase Konza seed, you have to be an approved grower. That's kind of how we manage the trademark at the grower level. Currently, there are no herbicides or pesticides that are approved by the EPA for use on Konza grain. So that's because of that, a lot of the growers tend to either be transitional or organic. And the market has largely been in that realm, but is seemingly expanding in the conventional space as well. We see more and more interest from companies that are not committed to just buying only organic grain. We do focus on growers who have at least 20 acres to commit to Konza. As I said, we've just found that with smaller acreages, a couple of things happen. One is that with a grain that you're going to have to change combine settings and things like that. By the time you get out of a 5 to 10 acre field, half of the crop has been blown out the back of the combine, and that can be sort of a frustrating experience for growers. But also, a lot of folks who want to put in 1 or 2 acres want to put it in on the worst piece of land and ignore it, and then wonder why it didn't do well. Which so we like people to be a little bit invested in terms of planting a little bit larger acreage. Obviously, it helps to have either small grains or forage grass seed experience in terms of the harvesting and planting. And then again, the other thing is that because this is an experiment, we are really committed to ensuring that we collect data about what management practices were used and what kinds of fertilization people used, when they planted, when they mowed, did they graze it, all of those kinds of things, so that we can collect that data, analyze it, and have an idea of how to develop best practices for growers going forward. And this is really, in my mind, the most exciting piece of the work, is that we get to really collaborate with growers who are interested in doing this kind of experimentation. Of course, there are challenges to working with Konza. One is, as you can see here, that the seed size is small, so it's increasing over time. The top row is showing that It's actually about, right now, the variety that's on the market is probably about 30%, 30 to 50% the size of wheat. And here are our breeders working on exactly that project. We're also experimenting and learning about the different ways that Konza needs to be harvested and processed. So here's our researchers doing some hand threshing, and here they are picking up swathed Konza. So we're trying to build the supply at the same time as we're also trying to have that supply meet demand and build that demand. So we want to ensure, that we are building a market for this grain at the same time. And that, to me, is one of the most difficult pieces of this work, is to make sure that we have committed, that we have markets that are committed to the entire process, to the understanding of the experiment that we're engaged in, and not just looking for the lowest possible price on this product. Finally, just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of where we are in terms of commercialization, we are in this pilot phase. We're really looking at this proof of concept. You know, we're in this 1,000 to 100,000 acres area. It's still very much risk-taking, innovative folks who are interested and who are involved, and we're really putting in the pieces for this strategic, coordinated, and vision-led piece, in particular with the development of a Konza Stewards and Business Association, where folks are really able to go to the market with a unified vision of how this grain should be stewarded. So right now, Konza is on about 3,600 acres. This map is actually from last year. So we do have production acres this year in North Dakota, and also some in Idaho. So we've got a couple of new states. And as I said, this is also only in the US, but we also there are production acres in some other countries as well. The first acreages are going in Spain this year, and some in France, Sweden, and Germany also last year went in. So the priorities for moving the grain forward and ensuring that we can continue doing this are the breeding, as I've talked about, building a stable seed supply. So this year was the first year where we had committed acreages that were produced just for seed, as opposed to just being produced for grain, and then whatever was kind of left over in the market got shuttled to seed. So the seed quality historically had not been very good, and this year we saw huge improvement in that. So that was fantastic. We're also in the process of building and implementing the data collection mechanisms. We're working with with a research group in Colorado called SitSci, and they're building an app for us for data collection from new Konza growers. So I'm really excited about that as a way for growers to communicate in hopefully what is a more simple way than me sending them surveys and calling them all the time. I'll probably still have to call a lot of people, but that's fine. And then we're hoping that will also be a way that we can disseminate all of the data that we gather and feed it back into the research, so that we know what problems need to be solved for growers, and where we should try and direct research funds. That is kind of what I have. I really wanted to leave a lot of time for discussion, so I really hope that you all have a lot of questions. This is a huge, vast experiment, and I really do believe that it's one of the most important experiments that we can do as humans, is to change and make more resilient our agriculture, which obviously our lives are just so dependent on. And it really is an effort that is being taken on by a huge group of folks who are doing this kind of research, including growers. So with that, I would just love to take your questions. I saw a couple pop up, I think, so.
Yeah, Tessa, there's some questions in the chat, so I'll read them to you if you want to try to give an answer. One is, do you have numbers on how much carbon Konza sequesters versus commercial wheat?
So everyone wants the number. I know that everyone wants the number. As a research organization, we are reluctant to, we do that kind of research, but we're really reluctant to provide some kind of blanket number because it really depends on what your base soil organic matter is. It depends on what your base material for soil is. It depends on the year. It's something that there really is not a robust single number. I know that there are a lot of models out there that try and estimate these numbers, but it's very, very difficult to get at. And it also takes a really long time to understand, like, is this carbon that's being turned over or is this stable carbon? But what I can say that we do know very, very firmly is that the absolute best thing you can do to sequester carbon is to not have a crop that you have to till. Every time you turn over that soil, that's a huge release of carbon. So perennials are possibly are the best possible solution that we know of at this point for building that stable carbon.
Great. And there's another question that asks, what other perennial grains is the Land Institute working on?
Yeah, so we work on perennial wheat, which is a hybrid between Thinopyrum intermedium, which is the species of Konza, and durum wheat. And we do some with other wheats as well, but the primary one is a durum wheat. So we do a perennial wheat. We work on silphium, which is a native crop to kind of the central US. I'm sure that you have it in South Dakota. We primarily work on silphium integrifolium, also known as rosinweed. I don't know if you have that. And developing that as an oilseed crop. We work on perennial legumes. So we have a few different legumes that we work on. We work on sandfoin, lupin, cura clover, and then how many is that? And then we also work on perennial rice. We don't work on perennial rice at the Land Institute, but we fund research of perennial rice in China, and it's actually been adopted on a larger scale than Konza. And the primary driver for that crop has been the reduction in labor, in hand labor of planting and harvesting annual rice. And then the final crop is perennial sorghum. So we have a perennial sorghum breeding program.
Okay, we have a rather long question that I'll read to you from Doris. It says, in the presentation, you mentioned Native and Indigenous communities only twice, yet you have acreage in multiple states with large Native reservations and communities. What degree of relationships does Konza have with Native American communities? And if any, can you explain how the organization works alongside those communities? If not, how does the organization plan on reconciling with Indigenous communities moving forward?
Yeah, this is certainly something that I and the Ecosphere Studies program do some work with. So we have a couple of like I know that we have relationships that are sort of starting with some Indigenous communities that we're hoping to plant some Konza, but we also have an ethnobotany study going on for silphium in particular, because it is an indigenous, or it is a crop that's indigenous to the United States. So that is a crop that we are really interested in understanding the potential uses that indigenous people had. And most of that work is really headed up by our Ecosphere Studies program. So I know that Aubrey Strike-Krug, who's the director of that program, is working on developing relationships with the indigenous communities of that were traditionally that had the traditional lands in Kansas. So she's really working on developing those relationships. I think in general, our goal is to develop long-term relationships and not try to immediately have an understanding of, or not immediately try to propose some kind of solution. We would like to listen to and develop relationships with indigenous communities so that we have, so that their input is really driving the work. I hope that's a satisfactory answer. I feel like it's a difficult thing to answer because we really are at the beginning stages of developing those relationships. Yes, it should have been done 40 years ago, but it wasn't. So,
which may make it hard to answer another question that I have, and that is, what are the startup costs per acre of getting into Konza, and do you have ideas of the rate of return yet?
Yeah, so in terms of the startup costs, the seed is currently around somewhere between like $5 and $7 PLS, and it's planted at about 12 pounds an acre, so similar to like alfalfa or something like that. And in terms of return, I think the thing that is really eating into the return right now is that there are not that many processors, folks who want to process and dehull the grain. So that having to ship it to a processor that is prepared to work with a really small grain that has to be dehulled is the main challenge in terms of supply chain right now. The average cost this year, or the average price on Konza, it's still not all the Konza that was harvested this year has been sold. So I don't have numbers from this year's harvest, but last year's harvest, the average price was about $5 a pound. And most of what was sold was organic. So.
Okay, there's another question in, and that is, what is the lifespan of the current product? And yeah, give us like an estimate of number of years.
Yeah, so we recommend that folks plan on keeping it in for about 4 years. The answer is basically that it depends on the environment, and we don't really understand why. So in Minnesota, we've found that that folks get about 3 or 4 years, they have a pretty drastic drop off in terms of yield. But in Kansas, we don't see that. It's drought. Maybe it's because it's droughtier there, and that that environmental pressure means that the grain continues to be reproductive instead of going vegetative. We don't really understand yet why that happens in some places and not in others.
There's a question about the nutritional value of Konza compared to conventional cereals.
Yeah, so the food science research is still ongoing, but there have been a few publications. We know that it's high in protein, so the grain is usually around like 20%, which is quite high. And it does have gluten. It is not a gluten-free grain, but it does have weaker gluten, so it doesn't perform the same as a wheat will. It performs somewhere like maybe between a soft white wheat and rye in terms of baking quality. it also has high antioxidants and very high fiber.
Okay. There's a question about youth, involving young people. Does Konza have plans for involving youth and sustainable internships to revive farming and agriculture in younger communities?
Yeah, so we at the Land Institute, we have an intern program that's mainly focused on folks who are usually kind of in their undergraduate education in that realm, which I don't know if that counts as young people. To me it does, but so we try and mentor and steward that kind of that age, but we also in Minnesota, we are working with an FFA group, and that's primarily led by AURI and some of our Minnesota partners. And then we have some outreach going on to that is really in the infancy and with the White Earth community in Minnesota, and that I'm just really excited that we're starting that. Yeah, so we have a few of those projects, and we're hoping that that's going to continue and be more of a focus as seed becomes more available, so that we have more to experiment with in different ways than just scaling production.
Great. So how about as a forage for cattle? Has there been research, or is there continuing research with that, and how's that looking?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information on intermediate wheatgrass as a forage crop. We know that it's a really good forage grass, and has been used for, as I said, like about 100 years in the United States. This is the same species. We expect the forage quality is probably pretty similar. There may be a slight trade-off in the sense, since we've been selecting it for grain, maybe it doesn't, we don't. I know that there are folks at Ohio State who are doing that research now and who are doing grazing studies on Konza. So some of that research is ongoing, but basically we know it's a pretty decent forage. And even the straw harvest, late summer straw harvest after you harvest the grain, is generally pretty palatable. A lot of the growers that I talk with have been using it as like just a low quality addition to their rations.
Okay. In one of the pictures that you showed, it looked like they were combining windrows. So does Konza have to be windrowed, or can it be straight cut?
It can be straight cut. So some growers have been, both things have been done. Windrowing provides a little, like a benefit in terms of ensuring that all of the grain is dry when you pick it up. But of course, in a place where you might catch a rain, that's a real danger. So folks have also straight cut it with no problem. And both stripper and dripper heads have been used. And I think the stripper head, which was designed for forage grass seed, of course, is probably the ultimate, but yeah.
All right, well, we have had lots of great questions, so thanks to our participants for that. I'm not seeing any more right now in the chat box. So if you have a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself also if you have a question that you want to ask, or type it in. We're almost to the end of our time, so if you have a question, we still have time for a couple.
Hey, I have a quick question, Carrie. Tessa, are you guys still collaborating with Patagonia Provisions on the Konza wheat beer?
Yeah. So they actually have 2 beers on the market that are produced at Hopworks Urban Brewery in Portland. Patagonia is still really, really important in terms of the collaboration, and they provided a lot of the initial funding for research, in particular, like in the food science and also in the perennial polyculture realm. So they're still a very important partner.
That was great. Awesome. Hey, that was an excellent talk. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm glad. I hope I was able to answer most folks' questions to satisfaction. And
yeah, I want to thank you so much, Tessa. This has been great. I've learned a lot. I had no idea of anything about Konza before, so this has been really good. I would guess that a lot of us on the presentation are just in the learning stages. So good to have your website again is just Konza.org.
Mm-hmm. And you can find a lot of information about Konza there, but you can also find if you want to apply to become a grower. And you should, if you do, just note in the, like, it'll ask if you have a connection with a researcher on the form. Please feel free to just say that you were at this particular presentation and are a member of SDSPA. That just helps me kind of know who I'm talking to, and I would love to chat more. So
Great. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much, Tessa. We really appreciate you taking the time this evening to be with us.
yeah, I'm really happy to. I have my mom's from South Dakota, so always enjoy the
Good for her.
chance to talk with South Dakotans.
And again, you are all seeing a poll now coming up on your screen, so please answer that. And then we will join the next session with Chef Kim in just a little bit. And that'll be another Zoom link.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tessa.